Boom! I'm minding my own business, feeding my horses at sunrise when I spot it. A crisp, white envelope slid under my cabin door, screaming trouble in big, bold red letters. Eviction notice. My heart dropped like a rock in a well. This was my ranch, my slice of paradise. My blood, sweat, and tears poured into 50 acres of rolling hills and wide open skies. The HOA, yep, the Homeowners Association, thought they could kick me out of my own home? No way. Hi everyone. Welcome. Back to the channel. I'm Jake, your favorite rancher with a story that'll make your jaw drop. Today I'm spilling the tea on how the HOA tried to evict me from my ranch and how I fought back by doubling their rent and blocking their parking lot. Buckle up because this ride gets wild. Hit that subscribe button and stick around. Sadiyai. Been living on this ranch for 5 solid years, and let me tell you, it's my everything. Picture this. Golden sunrises painting the hills, the soft whinny of my horses, Bucky and Star, grazing in the pasture, the creak of my old wooden porch. As I sip coffee in the morning quiet, this 50-acre spread was my dream come true. I'd saved every penny for my old construction job, bought it fair and square and turned it into a working ranch. Cattle roaming, a veggie garden thriving, and a cozy log cabin I built with my own 2 hands. It's not just a place. It's my life, my sanctuary, my escape from the chaos of the world. So when I saw that eviction notice, it felt like someone had punched me in the gut and said, "Pack up and get out, Jake." I wasn't just mad, I was ready to fight. I snatched that envelope off the floor, my boot still muddy from the barn, and tore it open. The paper shook in my hands as I read it. Notice of eviction, it said, all official and cold. The HOA claimed I had 30 days, 30 measly days, to vacate my entire ranch. My home, my horses, my cattle, gone. I paced the creaky floorboards of my cabin, my mind racing. Who were these people? The HOA didn't even own my land. Well, not exactly. Here's the twist, folks, and lean in close for this one. A tiny corner of my property, about 2 acres, was leased to this nearby HOA. It's a long story, and I'll break it down for you. Way back in the 80s, my grandpa owned this ranch. He was a tough old guy, cowboy hat, calloused hands, the works. He made a deal with the HOA, a small group back then, to lease them 2 acres for a community storage shed and a parking lot. They paid him $500 a month, peanuts even back then, and the deal just carried over when I inherited the place. I never thought much of it. That corner of my land was out of the way, tucked behind a hill, and I barely noticed the cars or the shed. The $500 hit my bank account every month, and I'd use it for feed or fence repairs. No big deal, right? Wrong. That little lease was about to become the spark that lit this whole wildfire. I sat down at my rickety kitchen table. The eviction notice staring me down like a rattlesnake. The HOA's letter claimed I'd violated some rule about land use. Land use? I'm a rancher. My land's got barns, cattle trails, and a muddy corral, exactly what a ranch should have. I read on, my blood boiling. They said my property wasn't up to community standards and that I had to clear out in 30 days or they'd take further action. Further action? What did that even mean? Were they going to send a bulldozer to my cabin, drag my horses away? I pictured Bucky and Star, my trusty pals, being hauled off, and my chest tightened. This wasn't just about land. It was personal. Leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the hills I loved. The morning mist still clung to the grass, and a hawk circled overhead, free as could be. This was my home, and no suit-wearing HOA busybodies were going to take it from me. But I had to be smart. I'm no lawyer, folks. I'm a guy who wrestles hay bales and fixes tractors. But I knew I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and called my buddy Sarah, a lawyer who'd helped me with a fence dispute a few years back. "Jake, read me the letter," she said, calm as ever. I stumbled through the legal jargon, words like encroachment and bylaws, and she listened quietly. When I finished, Sarah laughed. "Jake, they've got no leg to stand on," she said. "They can't evict you from your own property. That's absurd. The lease might complicate things, but we'll figure it out." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been. holding. "So I'm not losing my ranch?" I asked. "Not if I can help it," she said. "Send me the lease and the notice. We'll dig into this." I hung up feeling a flicker of hope, but the anger still burned. Who did the HOA think they were? Some big-shot neighborhood council, acting like they owned my 50 acres? I stomped out to the porch, the eviction notice crumpled in my fist, and looked toward that leased corner of land. I could just make out the edge of their parking lot, cars gleaming in the sun. That's when it hit me. They needed me more than I needed them. See, that 2-acre patch was their lifeline. The HOA's fancy gated community. Big houses. Perfect. Lawns relied on my land for their storage and parking. Without it, they'd be stuck. I started to grin, folks. They thought they could bully me, scare me off my ranch with a flimsy letter. They'd picked the wrong cowboy. I wasn't just going to roll over, I was going to fight dirty, and I had a plan brewing. Sarah texted me later that day. "Found the lease. You've got power here, Jake. There's a clause, rent can be adjusted with 60 days notice." My eyes lit up. Adjust the rent? Oh, this was about to get good. The HOA had no idea the storm coming their way. I stood on my porch, the sun climbing higher, and took a deep breath of that fresh ranch air. Hay, horses, and freedom. This was my land, my legacy, and I'd fight tooth and nail to keep it. The cow. Eviction notice was their first shot, but I was loading up for a comeback they'd never see coming. "You messed with the wrong rancher," I muttered, tossing the letter onto my table. "Guys, this is just the start." The HOA thought they could steamroll me, but I was about to turn the tables, doubling their rent and blocking their parking lot. What would you do if someone tried to take your home? Drop a comment. All right, folks, buckle up because the plot thickens. Last time I told you about the shocking eviction notice the HOA slapped me with, trying to boot me off my own 50-acre ranch. I was mad, confused, and ready to fight. Hi everyone, welcome. Back to the channel. I'm Jake, your rancher with a wild story. How the HOA tried to evict me and how I hit back by doubling their rent and blocking their parking lot. Today, we're diving into the HOA's sneaky plan to steal my land. If you missed part 1, go check it out, smash that like button, and subscribe for the craziest ranch saga on YouTube. Let's get into it. After that eviction notice landed on my doorstep, I couldn't sleep. I'd pace my cabin at night, the creak of the floorboards keeping me company, staring at that crumpled letter on my kitchen table. Eviction notice. In red ink, felt like a personal attack. My ranch, 50 acres of rolling hills, grazing cattle, and my horses, Bucky and Star, was my whole world. I'd poured 5 years into this place, building fences, planting a garden, fixing up the cabin. And now the homeowners association, some uppity group from the gated community next door, thought they could just kick me out? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I sat down with a strong cup of coffee, black, bitter, just how I like it, and read that letter again, word for word. The HOA claimed I'd violated a land use rule, saying my ranch wasn't up to community standards. Community standards? I laughed out loud, startling my dog Rusty, who was napping by the fireplace. I'm a rancher, not a guy with a manicured lawn and a white picket fence. My land had muddy trails from my truck, a barn full of hay and cow, pies scattered across the pasture, exactly how a ranch should be. But the more I read, the angrier I got. The letter said I had 30 days to vacate or they'd escalate the matter. Escalate? What? Were they going to send a SWAT team for my horses? I wasn't buying it. The fine print was where it got shady. Tucked at the bottom, in tiny letters, they mentioned expansion plans and how my property was interfering with the community's vision. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under me, and stared out the window. The sun was dipping low, painting the hills gold, and I could hear Bucky whinnying in the distance. Expansion plans? That's when it clicked. I grabbed my boots, hopped in my old pickup, and drove to the edge of my land, where those 2 acres I leased to the HOA sat. I'd always ignored that corner, out of sight behind a hill, but now I saw it. Their parking lot, packed with shiny SUVs, and a storage shed stuffed with who knows what. This wasn't about land use. They wanted my ranch. I pulled over, dust kicking up around my tires, and just watched. A guy in a polo shirt was unloading golf clubs from his car. Another lady was fussing over a perfectly trimmed bush near the lot. This HOA ran a fancy gated community next door. Big houses, pools, kids on scooters, the whole suburban dream. I'd never cared much. They stayed on their side. I stayed on mine. But now I remembered whispers I'd heard at the feed store. Rumors that the HOA wanted to grow, build more houses, maybe a clubhouse or a fancy pool. My 50 acres with its open fields and killer views was prime real estate. They weren't just annoyed by my muddy ranch life. They wanted to bulldoze it and turn it into their suburban paradise. I drove back to the cabin, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My mind raced. How could they evict me from my own land? I bought this place, deed and all, 5 years ago. The only tie they had was that 2-acre lease. $500 a month for their parking and storage, a deal my grandpa made back in the 80s. I'd never questioned it. The money was nice for extra hay or a new saddle, but now I saw their game. They'd twisted some old HOA bylaw, some dusty rule in their handbook to claim my ranch. My whole 50 acres wasn't suitable for their shiny community. It was a power grab, plain and simple, and I felt the fury bubbling up like a storm. I called my lawyer friend Sarah again. She'd already told me they couldn't evict me, but I needed more. "Sarah, what's their angle?" I asked, pacing my porch, the evening crickets chirping around me. I read her the letter, every vague, snooty line about land use and community standards. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Jake, this is a bluff. They can't take your ranch. It's yours. Deed and title, lock and stock. But they're banking on scaring you off." I stopped pacing, leaning against the porch rail. "Scaring me? Why?" I asked. "Follow the money," she said. "They want your land for cheap. That lease, it's their foothold. Send me the agreement and I'll dig deeper." I rummaged through an old filing cabinet in my cabin, dust flying as I pulled out a faded, yellowed lease from 1987 signed by my grandpa's shaky hand and some HOA bigwig. I scanned it and sent it to Sarah, my heart pounding. While I waited, I walked out to the barn, the cool night air calming me a bit. I patted Bucky, my big bay horse, his warm flank steady under my hand. "They're not taking you, buddy," I whispered. Rusty trotted behind me, tail wagging, loyal as ever. This ranch was my home, my family's legacy, my grandpa's dream, now mine. No way was I letting some greedy HOA steal it. Sarah called back an hour later, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Jake, this lease is gold. It's old, but it's solid. And check this, there's a clause. You can adjust the rent with 60 days notice. They're locked in, but you've got power." I froze, a grin creeping across my face. Adjust the rent? My mind started spinning. They thought they could bully me with this eviction stunt, scare me into packing up and leaving my ranch behind. But they'd misjudged me. I wasn't some pushover. I was a rancher, tough, stubborn, and ready to dig in my heels. I sat on my porch steps, the stars popping out overhead, and thought it through. The HOA's plan was sneaky. Use a fake eviction threat to spook me, maybe force me to sell cheap so they could snatch my land for their expansion. More houses, more dues, more money in their pockets. My ranch, with its hills and open space, was worth way more than they'd ever admit. They figured I'd panic, sign away my rights, and ride off into the sunset. But I saw through it now. That lease, that little 2-acre corner, was their weakness. They needed my land for their parking and storage. Without it, their perfect community would crumble. I stood up, boots scuffing the dirt, and looked toward that leased patch. I could just make out the glow of streetlights from their parking lot. A crazy idea started brewing, folks. They wanted a fight? I'd give them one. I'd hit them where it hurt, their wallets and their precious convenience. Doubling the rent was just the start. I had something even bigger up my sleeve. "You picked the wrong rancher, HOA," I muttered, a fire lighting in my chest. "Guys, this is getting good." The HOA's sneaky plan was clear, but I was ready to turn the tables. What would you do? Comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe. For part 3, trust me, you won't believe what's next. See you soon. Alright folks, here's where the fight really heats up. Last time I uncovered the HOA's sneaky plan to scare me off my 50-acre ranch with a bogus eviction notice. Also, they could snatch my land for their fancy expansion. I was mad, but I had a secret weapon, an old lease from my grandpa's days. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jake, your rancher with a wild tale, how the HOA tried to evict me, and how I struck back by doubling their rent and blocking their parking lot. Today we're diving into my first big move. If you missed parts 1 and 2, check them out, smash that like button, and subscribe for the craziest ranch saga on YouTube. Let's ride. I woke up that morning still fuming, the eviction notice, haunting me like a bad dream. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning, picturing the HOA bulldozing my cabin, my horses, Bucky and Star, hauled away, my cattle scattered. My 50-acre ranch, my slice of heaven with rolling hills and open skies, was under attack. I stumbled to the kitchen, brewed a pot of strong coffee, and sat at my rickety table. The faded lease agreement from the 80s spread out in front of me. My lawyer friend Sarah's words echoed in my head. You can adjust the rent with 60 days notice, Jake. It's your power. Power? I grinned, sipping my coffee, the steam warming my face. The HOA thought they could bully me, but I was about to flip the script. I leaned back, the chair creaking, and stared out the window. The sun was rising, painting the pasture gold, and I could hear my dog Rusty barking at a squirrel, tail wagging like crazy. This ranch was my life. 5 years of sweat, building fences, mending the barn, planting a garden that actually grew carrots and tomatoes. The HOA, with their gated community of perfect lawns and shiny cars, wanted to turn my land into more cookie-cutter houses. That 2-acre corner I leased them for $500 a month, storage sheds and a parking lot, was their foothold. But that lease, signed by my grandpa, gave me a weapon. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to make them squirm. I grabbed a notebook, my hands shaking with excitement, and started crunching numbers. That $500 a month was a joke. My grandpa said it back in 1987, when gas was cheap and $500 bought a lot more hay. I paced the cabin, boots thumping on the wood floor, thinking hard. What was that 2 acres worth now? I knew a guy at the feed store who'd leased land nearby, $200 a month for less space. I tapped my pencil, heart racing. The HOA relied on my land for their parking and storage. Without it, their fancy neighborhood would be a mess. I could hit them where it hurt, their wallets. Let's double it, I muttered, scribbling $1,000. Why? Because I could, and because they deserved a wake-up call. I sat down, grabbed my laptop, an old clunker that whirred like a tractor, and typed up a notice. To the HOA, I wrote, pursuant to the lease agreement dated March 15, 1987, I, Jake Thompson, hereby adjust the rent for the 2-acre parcel from $500 to $1,000 per month, effective 60 days from receipt of this notice. I leaned back, reading it aloud, a grin spreading across my face. It sounded official, tough, like a rancher standing his ground. I called Sarah to double-check. Jake, it's perfect, she said, chuckling. It's legal in the contract and they can't wiggle out. Send it certified mail, make it official. I printed it, signed it in bold ink, and drove to the post office, dust trailing my pickup. My heart pounded as I handed it over. Game on, ho. I spent the next few days on edge, working the ranch to keep busy. I mucked stalls, the smell of hay and horses calming my nerves, and fixed a fence post the cows had knocked loose. Every time I heard a car on the gravel road, I'd peek out, half expecting the HOA to storm in. A week later, it happened. I was tossing hay bales from my truck when a shiny black SUV roared up my driveway, kicking up dust. Out stepped Mr. Carlson, the HOA president, scowl on his face, cheap suit wrinkled, waving my rent notice like a flag. Jake, what is this nonsense? He shouted, stomping toward me. I wiped sweat off my brow, leaned on my pitchfork, and tipped my hat. What's the problem, Carlson? I said, cool as a breeze. You can't do this, he yelled, his face turning redder than my barn. Doubling the rent? $1,000 a month? It's outrageous. We've paid $500 for decades. I crossed my arms, staring him down. It's in the lease, Carlson. 60 days notice. My land, my rules. Pay up or get out. He sputtered, jabbing a finger at me. This is blackmail. We'll sue you. We need that land for our community. Storage. Parking, everything. I laughed, surprising myself. Sue me? You're the ones trying to evict me from my own ranch. Check the contract, pal. He glared, eyes narrow, and I could see the gears turning. They needed that 2 acres. Without it, their residents would be parking on lawns, their sheds useless. Carlson paced, dirt crunching under his polished shoes, muttering about legal action and community rights. I stood my ground, the sun beating down, my hat shading my eyes. Inside, my stomach churned. Would they really sue? Could they fight this? But Sarah said the lease was ironclad, and I trusted her. I thought about my grandpa, a tough old rancher who'd made this deal to help the HOA back when they were just a few neighbors. He'd never let them push him around, and neither would I. You've got 60 days, I said, voice steady. Pay the new rent or the lease is done. Carlson stopped, glared, then stormed back to his SUV, slamming the door. Tires spun as he peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust. I let out a breath, leaning on my pitchfork, watching him disappear. My heart was racing, but I felt alive. The HOA thought they could scare me with their eviction stunt, make me pack up my horses and cattle and hand over my ranch for cheap. But I'd just fired the first shot. Doubling the rent was bold. $1,000 a month would sting, and I knew it. I walked to the porch, Rusty trotting beside me, and sipped water from my canteen, the cool liquid soothing my dry throat. The hills stretched out, peaceful and mine, and I felt a fire in my chest. They'd underestimated this rancher, and I wasn't done yet. I spent the evening thinking, the crickets chirping outside, a breeze rustling the curtains. The HOA needed that parking lot, cars lined up daily, residents relying on it. The storage shed held their tools, lawn mowers, maybe even holiday decorations for their fancy community parties. Without my 2 acres, they'd be scrambling. I grinned, an idea brewing. Doubling the rent was just step 1. If they kept pushing, I'd hit harder. I pictured their faces when the new bill came. Shock, anger, panic. Would they pay? Fight? I didn't know, but I was ready. My ranch, my home, my legacy. It was worth fighting for. I climbed into bed, the eviction notice and lease beside me, and stared at the ceiling. The HOA's sneaky plan had backfired, and I'd taken control. But I had a feeling they wouldn't. Go quietly. Bring it on, I whispered, the moonlight glowing through the window. Guys, this is getting wild. I doubled their rent and stared down the HOA, but the battle's just beginning. What would you do? Drop a comment, smash that like button, and subscribe for part 4. Trust me, the next move is epic. See you next time, folks. Here we go, folks, the moment you've been waiting for. Last time I turned the tables on the HOA, doubling their rent from $500 to $1,000 a month after they tried to evict me from my own 50-acre ranch. They thought they could bully me, but I wasn't backing down. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jake, your rancher with a wild story, how the HOA tried to evict me, and how I fought back by doubling their rent and blocking their parking lot. Today we're diving into the chaos of my next big move. If you missed the earlier parts, go check them out, smash that like button, and subscribe for the craziest ranch saga on YouTube. Let's roll. I woke up that morning with fire in my veins. The HOA hadn't stopped their nonsense after I sent the rent increase notice. Instead, they doubled down, sending me nasty letters, 3 in 1 week, full of legal jargon and threats. Cease and desist, they wrote, claiming I was disrupting the community. Disruptive me? They even tried to tow my old pickup truck off my own driveway, claiming it was parked improperly on my land. I watched from my porch as a tow truck driver crept up, hook ready, but I marched out, boots stomping, and told him, "Touch that truck and you'll be towing it from my fist." He backed off, tires squealing, but I was done playing nice. The HOA wanted a war? I'd bring the battle to their doorstep. I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, the steam rising in the cool dawn air, and stared across my 50-acre ranch. The hills glowed pink with sunrise. My horses, Bucky and Star, grazed in the pasture, and my dog Rusty chased a butterfly, tail wagging like a metronome. This was my home. 5 years of sweat, fixing fences, mucking stalls, building a life. The HOA, with their fancy gated community next door, thought they could scare me off for their big expansion dreams. That 2-acre patch I leased them for their parking lot and storage shed was their lifeline, and I just doubled the rent. But they kept pushing, and I was ready to push harder. That's when a wild idea hit me. Block their precious parking lot. I walked to the edge of my land, the grass crunching under my boots, and studied that leased corner. Their parking lot sat there, packed with shiny SUVs and sedans, a lifeline for their residents. Next to it, the storage shed held their lawnmowers, tools, maybe even their fancy Christmas lights. But here's the kicker, folks. The only way to that lot was a narrow gravel road, my gravel road, on my property. The deed was clear. I'd checked it with my lawyer friend Sarah. That access road was mine, and I could do whatever I wanted with it. I grinned, the plan forming like a storm cloud. They needed that road to get to my 2 acres. No road, no parking, no storage, pure chaos. Time to teach the HOA a lesson they'd never forget. I hustled to the barn, the smell of hay and leather filling my nose, and fired up my old green tractor. It rumbled to life, coughing a puff of smoke, and I felt like a cowboy riding into battle. I drove it slow and steady, the engine growling, down to that gravel road. My heart pounded, part nerves, part excitement, as I parked it smack in the middle, blocking the path completely. But I wasn't done, folks. I grabbed a dozen hay bales from the barn, big heavy ones, and hauled them in my pickup, sweat dripping down my back. I stacked them around the tractor, tall golden walls of hay, making a barricade no car could pass. No warning, no note, just pure rancher justice. I stepped back, hands on my hips, and admired my work. Their parking lot, cut off, game on. By 10 a.m., the chaos started. I was back at the cabin, sipping water on the porch, when I heard honking, angry, loud blasts echoing across the hills. I grabbed my binoculars and peeked. Cars lined up at the gravel road, BMW, Lexus, you name it. Drivers leaning out, yelling, faces red. A lady in a yoga outfit shook her fist. A guy in a golf shirt paced, cell phone glued to his ear. I couldn't help but chuckle, Rusty wagging his tail beside me. The HOA's perfect little world was crumbling. No parking, no access to their sheds. Residents circled, confused, some pulling onto muddy grass, tires spinning. I leaned back, in my rocking chair, the wood creaking, and thought, you messed with the wrong rancher, folks. It didn't take long for the big guns to show up. Around noon, a familiar black SUV roared up my driveway, dust flying. Mr. Carlson, the HOA president, jumped out, his cheap suit wrinkled, his scowl deeper than a canyon. Jake, what the hell is this? He shouted, pointing toward my tractor and hay. Masterpiece. I tipped my hat cool as could be and sipped my water. What's the problem, Carlson? I asked, smirking. You've blocked our road, our parking lot. People can't get in, can't get their stuff, he yelled, arms flailing. I stood up, boots planted firm, and crossed my arms. My road. My land, Carlson. You don't like it? Pay the new rent and stop trying to evict me from my own ranch. His face went purple, veins popping, and he sputtered, This is sabotage. We're calling the sheriff. You'll regret this. I shrugged, calm as a summer breeze. Go ahead, call him. It's my property. He stormed off, phone in hand, and I watched him go, my stomach twisting a little. What if the sheriff sided with them? But Sarah had checked the deed. My road. My rights. I patted Rusty, his fur warm under my hand, and muttered, We've got this, boy. The sun climbed higher, the hills glowing, and I felt strong. This ranch was mine, my grandpa's legacy, my home, and I'd fight dirty to keep it. An hour later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up, lights flashing, but no siren. Deputy Harris, a guy I'd known since high school, stepped out, hat tilted, looking tired. Carlson trailed behind, ranting, pointing at my barricade. "Jake, what's going on?" Harris asked, scratching his head. I walked over, deed in hand, and laid it out. "This is my land. My road, Harris. The HOA's trying to evict me from my own ranch. I'm just protecting what's mine." I handed him the deed, my heart thumping, and he read it slow, nodding. Carlson butted in. "He's blocking our community. It's illegal." Harris held up a hand, studied the papers, then shrugged. "Sorry, Mr. Carlson, this road's on Jake's property. He's within his rights." Carlson's jaw dropped, and I swear, folks, I almost whooped right there. The deputy tipped his hat to me, said, "Stay safe, Jake," and drove off. Carlson glared, eyes like daggers, then stomped to his SUV, tires spinning as he left. I leaned against the porch rail, a grin splitting my face, and watched the car still honking, stuck behind my hay bales. The HOA was in chaos. Residents arguing, parking on lawns, no way to their sheds. I sipped my water, the sun warm on my shoulders, and felt like a king. They'd tried to scare me off, but I'd hit back harder. I walked out to the barricade, the tractor gleaming green, hay bales standing tall. A breeze rustled the grass, and Bucky whinnied from the pasture like he was cheering me on. The HOA underestimated me, thought I'd cave to their threats. But this rancher doesn't back down. Doubling the rent stung, but blocking their lot? That was a gut punch. I knew they'd come back, angrier, maybe with lawyers, but I was ready. "Bring it, HOA," I muttered, kicking a pebble. "Guys, this is wild. I blocked their parking lot and watched them squirm. What would you do?" Comment below, smash that like button, and subscribe for part 5. The showdown's coming. See you next time, folks. All right, folks, we've made it to the grand finale. Last time I took the fight to the HOA, doubling their rent and blocking their parking lot with my tractor and hay bales after they tried to evict me from my 50-acre ranch. Chaos erupted and they were mad, but I wasn't backing down. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jake, your rancher, with the wildest story, how the HOA tried to evict me and how I hit back hard. Today we're wrapping it up with a sweet taste of victory. If you missed the earlier parts, go binge them now, smash that like button, and subscribe for the craziest ranch saga on YouTube. Let's finish this ride. The morning after I blocked the HOA's parking lot, I woke up to the sun rising over my 50-acre ranch, painting the hills gold and pink. My horses, Bucky and Star, whinnied in the pasture, and my dog Rusty bounded around, chasing a rabbit through the dew-soaked grass. I sipped coffee on my porch, the steam curling in the cool air, and grinned at the chaos I'd unleashed. Cars were still lined up beyond my tractor and hay barricade, honking faintly, their perfect little community in a tailspin. The HOA thought they could scare me off my land with a bogus eviction notice, but I'd doubled their rent to $1,000 a month and cut off their precious parking lot. I felt like a cowboy who just won a showdown, but I knew they'd come back, swinging. The fallout was fast, folks. My phone buzzed all day. Angry voicemails from HOA members, shouting about inconvenience and "how dare you." One lady screeched, "I can't get my yoga mats from the shed, Jake." I laughed, leaning against the barn, the smell of hay and leather around me. They'd tried to tow my truck, sent nasty letters, and threatened to kick me off my own ranch, all for their greedy plan to snatch my land for more houses. But my lawyer friend Sarah had my back, confirming the lease and my road were mine. I'd turned the tables, and now they were scrambling, cars parked on lawns, residents bickering, their storage shed locked behind my barricade. By day 2, I was feeding the cattle, pitchfork in hand, sweat beading under my hat when I heard tires crunching gravel. A black SUV rolled up. Mr. Carlson, the HOA president, and 2 other board members, all in stiff suits, stepping out like they were in a courtroom drama. I wiped my hands on my jeans, heart thumping, and walked over, Rusty trotting at my heels. Carlson's scowl was gone, replaced by a tight fake smile. "Jake, can we talk?" he said, voice low, hands clasped. I tipped my hat, leaning on my fence, and said, "Sure, Carlson, porch is open, let's hear it." Inside I was buzzing. Were they caving, or was this another trick? We sat on my porch, the old rocking chairs creaking, the hills stretching out behind us. Carlson cleared his throat. The other two, a stern woman with a clipboard and a guy in glasses, shifting awkwardly. Jake, this situation has gotten out of hand. Carlson started, glancing at my barricade in the distance. The rent. Hike the roadblock. Our residents are upset. No parking, no storage access. We'd like to negotiate. I sipped my coffee, slow and cool, hiding my grin. Negotiate? A week ago they were trying to evict me from my own home. I leaned forward, boots planted, and said, "You started this, Carlson. Trying to boot me off my ranch? I'm just protecting. What's mine? What's your offer?" The woman with the clipboard piped up, her voice sharp. "We'll pay the $1,000 a month, but you move that tractor and hay. Now. People need to park." I raised an eyebrow, heart racing. They'd blinked. The $500 rent my grandpa said in the 80s was history, and $1,000 would buy new fencing, better feed, maybe a saddle for Star. But I wasn't done. "Not so fast," I said, crossing my arms. "You threatened my home, my horses, my life. Want the eviction nonsense dropped, gone in writing, and an apology on paper for trying to bully me." Carlson's face tightened. The guy in glasses coughed and the woman scribbled furiously. I held my breath. Would they walk? They huddled by their SUV, whispering, gesturing, Carlson's hands flailing. I petted Rusty, his fur warm, and watched. The clouds drift over my hills. This ranch was my everything. 5 years of hard work, memories of my grandpa teaching me to ride here, the quiet nights under the stars. No HOA was taking that. Carlson came back, jaw tight, and said, "Fine. Jake, we'll drop the eviction claim, write an apology, and pay the $1,000, just open the road." I stood towering over him and stuck out my hand. "Deal. Get me the papers and the tractor moves." They nodded, shook my hand, and drove off, dust trailing. The next day, a courier dropped off a thick envelope. I tore it open on the porch. Heart pounding, there it was. A letter killing the eviction, signed by the board, and a typed apology. "We regret any misunderstanding regarding your property and acknowledge your rights as landowner," it read. I whooped, Rusty barking, and waved it like a flag. The new rent, $1,000 a month, started hitting my account. Cha-ching, folks. I grabbed my keys, hopped in my pickup, and drove to the barricade. I fired up the tractor, its rumble shaking the ground, and hauled the hay bales back to the barn, sweat dripping, muscles aching. The road was clear, cars rolled in, and the HOA's parking lot was theirs again, but they knew who was boss. I leaned against my truck, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the pasture. Bucky and Star grazed, tails swishing, and the cattle lowed softly. I'd won, folks. The HOA's sneaky plan to steal my ranch for their expansion, more houses, a pool, their suburban dream, had crumbled. They'd tried to scare me with eviction, but I doubled their rent and blocked their lot, turning their world upside down. Now they'd pay fair, stay off my land, and think twice before messing with me. I walked to the barn, the smell of hay sweet, and felt lighter than I had in weeks. With that extra rent money, I got to work. I bought lumber and built a new fence along the edge of my property, tall, sturdy, painted red to mark my turf. I stood back, hands on my hips, and grinned. Part of it was for the cattle, keeping them from wandering, but part was a message. This is my ranch, HOA, stay out. I splurged a little too, new feed for the horses, a bigger water trough, even a comfy chair for the porch. Life was good again. I'd sit out there at night, stars blazing, crickets chirping, Rusty at my feet, and sip a cold drink, soaking in the peace of my 50 acres. The HOA kept their distance after that. I'd see Carlson's SUV roll by sometimes, but no glares, no letters. Their parking lot hummed. Their shed was back in use, but they knew I held the cards. My lawyer, Sarah, called to check in, laughing when I told her the story. "You're a legend, Jake," she said. "They'll think twice before tangling with a rancher again." I chuckled, picturing their faces when I'd blocked the road. Pure panic. This ranch, my grandpa's legacy, was safe, and I'd fought for it with everything I had. I stood on my porch one evening, the sky a blaze of orange, and took it all in. Hills, Horses, the quiet I loved. The HOA's war was over, and I'd come out on top. We did it, Rusty, I said, scratching his ears. Folks, that's my story. How the HOA tried to evict me and I doubled their rent and blocked their parking lot. What a ride. What would you have done? Drop a comment. Would you fight like me? Smash that like button if you're Team Rancher and subscribe for more crazy tales from my ranch. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. See you next time for more wild adventures. Yeehaw.